What's up, fam? Dr. O here. So many people have been watching that debate that's been circling between MSNBC host Stephanie Ruhle and Princeton University professor Eddie Glaude, where Eddie Glaude is talking about, look, y'all don't want to admit the fact that people ran and voted on race, and they voted on the misogyny. And, he was talking about the fact that white people want to excuse that away by trying to say that, no, it was about the economy. And Stephanie Ruhle is like, no, it was about the price of bread. And it was about, mom upset because her son has to live in the basement and all other type. And he was like, no. And that's the crux of everything right now, right? When I look at Stephanie Ruhle, when I look at people like Joe Scarborough and Mike Barnacle and all of these guys out there, and a lot of these other hosts out there, they really are representing what Dr. King talked about when he talked about in the letting from a Birmingham jail, when he talked about the threat of white liberals and how on many, and I know Scarborough is not a liberal, but I'm probably, for this case, I will say white folks who said that they were against Trump's policies, right? Or against Trump, or were never Trumpers. I think that's fair to say about some of these guys. And, he said that they could be more dangerous than the white racists that people are actually fighting. And because they believe in freedom on the installment plan, they have a kind of, we've done enough for you, kind of wait, hurry up, wait, hurry, kind of what we're seeing in the post-2020 diversity fatigue that we're seeing now. People having this mindset of we've done enough. When I hear these guys talk, and when I hear these guys make these excuses for why Trump won, it harkens back to that. And the fact that they want to excuse away the racism and the sexism, which are America's parents, which permeated throughout the campaign, is extremely frustrating. And I see many of these other hosts say something like, oh, yeah, and of course we had the racism and the misogyny, which is bad. Or they'll say something like, of course, one day we're going to have to talk about the racism and the sexism. No, the time to talk about it is now. The time to talk about it is now. Or they'll say something like, and yes, there were people who voted who are racist and sexist, but, I'm not excusing that, but there's no but. That's where you need to start. If you want to talk about economic policies, Trump didn't win on that. He didn't have better economic policies. And economic policies for everything, be it from daycare to unemployment, was tariffs. If it was really about the economy, why didn't other Republicans win during the primary? Are you going to tell me that Chris Christie didn't have a better economic strategy for these folks than Trump did? Or Ron DeSantis? Or Nikki Haley? Come on, seriously? So we know it's not about the economy because, one, Trump didn't have a robust economic plan for middle-class workers. And two, other people who ran into primaries had a better economic policy than he did. That's fact. Now, another thing people want to talk about is, why did all of these Latino men, and black men break for Trump and so on and so forth? I'm going to get to that later. The other issue we have to talk about is people say, well, Kamala shouldn't have run on the politics of identity. Democrats can't run on identity politics and the like. What is more identity politics inspired than saying, look at me and my white skin up here on stage? No other Republican candidate did that. Clearly, Nikki Haley couldn't do that. What's the name? Vivek couldn't do that. And DeSantis and the other folks may have had policies that were racist, but weren't going to explicitly say things like that. Kamala, as a black woman, cannot run on identity politics. Y'all the ones who said, Democratic consulting class, y'all the ones who said that she can't, talk about her race. She can't talk about being, or her ethnicity, right? She can't talk about those things because people don't want to hear that. They want to move on. They want to turn the page, right? Or they'll say that, she can't run on being a woman, because that's, you can't do that. Got to have the pantsuit, got to have the this, and so on and so forth. Can't talk about womanhood. And so many of these interviews try to bring her back to race and her gender. So she was already running with her hand tied behind her back because she actually couldn't run on her full identity. But a white man always can in this country. So to say that you can't run on identity politics, you're basically saying because the original identity politic is whiteness. So it's fine to run on that. It's the reason why I don't use people of color anymore, because people look at white as the original paper and everybody else is colored in, right? That's why. Because the original identity politics is whiteness. And the original identity politics is white cisgender manhood. That's what he ran on. It's kind of ironic because when you look at the twin parents of, racism and misogyny, it's actually a same-sex marriage because it's two men at the top doing that, right? Because that's our history of America, because women have always been excluded as it relates to finding these seats of power. So look, Glenn Singleton talks about in Courageous Conversations that it's not about race being the only factor, it's the missing factor. It's the thing that Scarborough and Mika and Stephanie Ruhle, just don't want to hit at. I see people who, like Nicole Wallace, have no problem talking about it and going to the heart of it. And the more y'all folks try to excuse away our pain, that's what actually hurts worse than Trump winning. Because people, many of us thought that y'all, or not, some of us were always realists. Many of us thought that y'all were going to be down with the cause and come around and see things. But the fact that y'all are excusing away the racism and the misogyny, or saying like that's not really at the top of the issue, you're doing us a disservice, and you're doing the cause of justice a disservice. And most black commentators I'm seeing on these networks are actually saying the truth, and they're being pushed to the side. Let's talk about another issue. The fact, Scarborough saying, some of these kids are coming to class and they're expressing their opinions, and they're being canceled, and they're being shut down, and these boys, they're in their rooms playing their video games, and they're alone and isolated, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, yeah, okay. Look, I'm a professor. I've been a professor for almost 20 years. I understand the importance of being able to embrace diverse opinions and perspectives. But I've also been doing this long enough to know that women have been coming into the classroom and having their opinions shut down since they were allowed to go to colleges, and somehow they still manage to engage in the university process. I also know that non-white people have been coming to classrooms for decades and centuries and have had their opinions shut down and still managed to be engaged in the process. This idea that we just need to basically coddle these guys who are, primarily men and primarily white men who are not used to having their opinions challenged, that's a problem. That's a problem. The idea is to teach them to do what everybody else has had to do, which is learn to listen. Learn to understand that we have two ears and one mouth, and we got to learn to use them in proportion. Learn to do more listening than we do talking. That's what women got to do in the classrooms. That's what non-white men have to do in these classroom spaces. This idea that, it's the guy living in the basement, it's just, we got to look out ways to get him out the house and get engaged. Oh, but he doesn't want to be engaged because his views might be challenged. For real? That's what we're doing now? Just let them think what they think? People always want to say that folks on the independent side, on the Democratic side, we need to do more listening to them. We need to think about them more. We need to holler at them more. But they don't want to holler at us. They don't want to listen to us more. Why aren't you going to them and saying that? Because what, whites just going to white? Is that what, white men just going to white men? That's what, we just got to accept that? So everybody has to paternalistically adjust themselves to that? No, they need to be challenged. I know so many white men who challenge their boys. I know so many white women and parents who challenge their boys, who talk to them about a pluralistic society, who talk to them about, creating a community where everybody's going to be celebrated and not tolerated, who challenge them on their sexism and their racism. The white people that I work with and around are in that space. And I'm not saying it depended on their vote. I was waiting to see their vote because I can't see their vote. I'm talking about in the things they say every day and the work they do every day that I see. And that's what we need more of in this society. This idea that Trump won because, I'm not feeling that. These guys have been coddled their entire lives. Now, as I said, I was going to get around to it. Y'all just got to be a little patient with it, brother. Got a lot on my mind today. I'm just saying. This idea, well, then how do you explain to Latino men who 55% voted for Trump? Are you serious? That's not hard at all. This idea, this is, Hispanic folks are next up in line to be white in this country. They got a whole even category for them now. White Hispanic, right? Or Hispanic non-white. Like, it's on the census. Like, it's there. This country has been built on who can get closer to whiteness, right? Look, Irish people went through it. Italians went through it. Germans went through it. All of these guys who weren't considered white now are. Now, Roland Martin says, I'm quoting Roland Martin, he said, you get closer to whiteness based on who can shout nigga the loudest. The people who can basically show that they could be more anti-black than any other group are going to get a pass to whiteness. When Irish people who had to deal with so much of the terrible things they endured in Ireland, living under the rule that they had to live it under, but that was a class system. And many came here and saw, oh, it's not based on class here, it's based on the color of your skin. I can rock with that. And a lot of the racism I experienced, the black people experienced growing up in Boston, came at the hands of Irish Americans, who at one point were considered just a step up away from black people in terms of the hierarchy in this country. And so a lot of Hispanic people see that. I've seen videos of Hispanic people talking about, oh, these guys who are coming in are criminals and they need, they're not and these are people who came here illegally and got amnesty under Reagan, who are saying those guys are criminals. Those guys are not like us. Like, I've literally watched the interviews. And so it's like, keep them out. There's a lot of dark-skinned people who are part of that community who don't live that same experience. And even some darker-skinned Hispanic people who got, amnesty, and they're like, are thinking like that as well. Because this idea of getting closer to whiteness. Look, I'm not talking about people who are part of this community who have always been down for racial justice, who have always fought in solidarity, with black people. I'm not talking about them. And look, when we talk about the black men who voted for Trump, first of all, it's not the same number as Latino men. So please don't put us in the same category. That's not fair to us. The fact of the matter is we were number 2 for Democrats once again. But yes, there are black men who have that Django Unchained type mentality. Read the book, The Grift by Clay Cane, who talks about people like Isaiah Montgomery and, black people who actually didn't want, back after Reconstruction, like actually voted for black men not have the right to vote. Like, that's always been part of the history because they feel like it's been closer to whiteness. D.L. Hughley put up a video of this black MAGA guy who got a text from MAGA supporters who said, look, we just wanted your vote. You're never going to be part of the MAGA movement. And he was so hurt and despondent. Like, seriously? So look, y'all, really at the end of the day, even Frederick Douglass, dealing with everything he was dealing with in this country, said that this is still the best place to fight for equality. So we continue to fight. But it would just be nice to see if for once in this country, these guys who want to continue to excuse away racism, it's like Eddie Glaude said to Stephanie Ruhle, you don't want to believe it. You don't want to believe that this country could still do what it did based on racism and misogyny, because there were other Republican candidates who represented more than what Trump represented. But they decided to go for the guy who was convicted of rape. They decided to go with the guy who was a felon. There was decided the guy who did. This is why Trump said, like, I don't need y'all's votes, I'm good. This is why they decided to go with the guy who ran on the ultimate original identity politics, which is whiteness, which is white maleness, which has always been the aspiration for so many people in this country. If we could just be treated like that. If we can just have that, and you look at some of these videos, look what's happening. You see these videos of these black women, these MAGA supporters running up on them, getting in their face, daring them to attack them, and so on and so forth. You hear the stories about, the black woman who was working at a department store or something and went to help a customer who said, now that Trump won, now you can go back and be in your place as a black woman. You've seen the threats by this potential AG, talking about what he's going to do to Letitia James. Oh, yeah, honey, you and your fat this and all of this other type of stuff. We wouldn't have done that in reverse. We wouldn't have done that in reverse had Kamala won. We would have moved forward, working a bill together. Like, that's what we do as a society. This is their character. So, y'all want to talk about, we want to be in a country where we can get on, the content of character. Well, we're seeing the character. Well, we already knew this. What are you going to say about that, Stephanie Ruhle? Like, when are you going to pay more attention to that, Scarborough? We can talk all day about Democratic strategy. We get that. But are you really willing to have that conversation about how Democrats need to abandon the white consultant class who's not going to help people see what we're talking about now? Because that's also part of the democratic process, right? That's part of taking the country back. Your boy ran on grievance and hate. What does economic policy have to do with a Nazi rally? Oh, well, maybe they didn't see the rally. Come on now, for real? Are you on the feeds that they're on? Do you see the algorithms that they get exposed to? Maybe they didn't hear the Jewish people need to have their head examined. And when I think about Jewish folks, the reason why they were number 3, from what I can understand demographically in terms of voting for Kamala, is because they know the history. They know the dog whistles. Because they know the dog whistles became bullhorns. They know this. And that's why they went 80% from last number I saw for Democrats. So look, y'all, America just needs to be real about this. We can continue to be optimistic and be upset, and we have to be realistic about what happened. And until we decide to talk about that, we're going to continue to get more of the same. That James Baldwin quotation is going around talking about, we can agree, and we can disagree on things, but if your disagreement is rooted in my non-existing, then, I can't rock with you. Many of these guys who voted for Trump don't want transgender people to exist. They don't want people who are here I'm not even going to say people who are here undocumented, because you're going to see a lot of documented people get swept up in this because of how they look. They don't want them here. They don't want women having a right to have a choice for what they do with their bodies. Their ideology is rooted in what other people can't do and can't have. And as one of my white female students said, I'm going to have a challenge having conversations with people whose idea is rooted in my ability to not be free. Why don't y'all go tell them to come talk to us and see how that conversation goes? Because they'll most likely spit in your face, physically or metaphorically. So we got work in this country to do. A lot of black folks here, a lot of black folks are upset and disappointed and mad, but not surprised, because we've seen this before. So we're going to keep rolling with or without y'all who want to continue to excuse this stuff away, continue to go at the economy, though your boy didn't even have a plan at all. They didn't even have concepts of an economic plan beyond tariffs. So it would be nice if y'all on these shows could just be real about this. Just be real about America. As I said in my other post, America. Just be real about that. Talk about all of the other things, and, maybe there should have been a primary, and maybe Biden should have stayed in or not stayed in. It's fine. But don't just explain away what this country was founded on. I said in my videos, Trump had a 248-year head start. You want to take, Hannah Nicole Jones, rewriting of the American origin story. He had to start going way back to 1619. So an over 400-year head start. However you want to take it, we just want y'all to be real about it, so we can have a real, as Singleton talks about, courageous conversation. Y'all are here for the conversation, but you're not here for the courageous one. And until you're ready for that, you'll continue to be part of the problem, despite as much as you want to talk about being part of the solution. And we need y'all to do better. Peace.